Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David, how are you doing today?
Well, it's a pretty damn exciting day to be an Edmonton Oilers fan, I have to say. I don't think the Oilers have been this busy at a trade deadline in kind of since the Cup run of
2006.
2006. Who did they pick up? Samsonov, Spacek, Pekka? No, Pekka was with the team already. Who else did they pick up?
Well, they got Rowley just a little bit before that,
Of course, yeah.
and they were just movers and shakers throughout that period.
Yeah. So today, Bruce, they traded Sam Gagner, 2 second-round picks for Andreas Athanasiou and Ryan Kuffner, who is an AHL forward. They traded a 5th-round pick for Tyler Ennis. And last night, of course, they traded a conditional 4th pick for Mike Green. So the cupboard's getting a little bare for mid-round draft picks. But, Bruce, they've really changed their roster. They've really added some interesting players. What's your take? Let's anything we talked about the Green trade. Have you anything else you want to say about it? What do you think about him on the power play, which has been discussed today?
Oh, yeah, a little surprised to hear people just assume he's going to move into number one on the power play unit. I mean, obviously, he's a very experienced guy, right shot defenseman, which you like in that position. With Oscar Klefbom out, the Oilers have been trying Darnell Nurse and then last night a little bit Ethan Bear, who are playing tons of minutes in other situations. So maybe that's an area where they can slot Green in and know that he'll probably perform okay with it, with his experience and so on. I don't know how big of a booming shot he has anymore. He certainly did have one at one time, but he certainly gives them some added flexibility and certainly experience back there. And when you're looking at a D-corps that's currently running 3 rookies, having a 34-year-old guy waiting in the wings may not be the worst idea.
So his power playing this year, he's been playing quite a bit. He's got 117 minutes on the power play in Detroit. And out of 83 NHL defensemen, Bruce, who have played regularly on the power play this year, that's more than 50 minutes. Yep. He ranks 76th out of 83 for power play scoring. So that's not very good. Now, when I posted that, a lot of people said, well, that's Detroit. They're terrible. Yeah, well, he's part of that.
Right.
Being terrible this year on the power play. And so count me as a skeptic. I mean, I don't mind trying him. Of course, give him a try. But, Mike Green was a great power player when he was Ethan Bear's age. That's when he was at his peak power play performance. I don't know why. It's not like power play minutes are tough minutes for anybody. They're not the toughest minutes. And I would like to see Ethan Bear stay there personally. But what really got me was the suggestion that was made by a few commentators that Green would be on the power play when Klefbom came back, cutting down on Klefbom's minutes. Man, they've got the number one power play in the NHL with Oscar Klefbom running it. He's doing a fantastic job, I think. The main job of the power play is to move the puck smartly to the right guy on the half wall. And it's either usually Nugent Hopkins or Draisaitl or McDavid. Klefbom's got that down to a fine art, Bruce.
He does.
And I'm prepared to say, yeah, let's see how Mike Green does. And he could probably do that job fairly well. He is a good pass for the puck. He set up Ovechkin and Backstrom all those years fairly well.
Yep.
But I'm not so sure about anyway, this will all play out and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, some of it too is people commenting at a distance, right?
Yeah.
And sort of say, well, what's Mike Green's reputation power play whiz? Edmonton's got a good power play, but they've got no sort of whiz point man that's got a huge reputation. So maybe that's where they'll slot Green in. And, the people that cover, league wide, I don't know that they know the situations of the individual teams as much as people who focus on one team will know about that team. And that's good and bad. Sometimes that provides some much needed perspective from outside as well. But I'm not sure I see a 34-year-old Mike Green rolling in and taking over Edmonton Oilers' number one power play. But I can see him playing some time on the power play, and if he clicks, well, he'll get more time on the power play.
It was Mark Spector who was saying that he expected Green to
Okay, well,
replace
that's
Clefbaum.
an insider to the team then, so I
Yeah,
stand
maybe that's
corrected.
what they're thinking. Maybe
I
that's what the
stand
Oilers are
corrected.
thinking. But anyway, whatever they're thinking, that can quickly change. I mean,
Hmm.
we heard last week that they were going to stick with Darnell Nurse on the power play,
Right,
and he was the guy, and this is what they
right.
were going to do. We heard that Bob Stauffer said it,
Yep.
but how long did that last? I mean, not very long. Ethan Bear was the number one guy as he should have been. I mean, I think there's a pecking order on these things, and Nurse had to be given a shot, but that wasn't working, so they went to Bear. All right, let's go to the big trade of the day, Bruce.
Hmm.
Andreas Athanasiou.
Hmm.
What do you say, man?
Well, I've been kind of um, looking hard at him. There's been a lot of talking about him all year, of course, and the uh, uh, the player certainly has his his downside. Apparently, he's well, by all record, he's not a very good defensive player. He's a speedster. Whether he's a speedster who can play with another speedster, whether he's a speedster who can play without the puck and go to places where someone can get him the puck, as opposed to taking it there himself, which is kind of his rep with Detroit, again from a distance. Um, how well can he fit the need of the team, which is wingers who can play well without the puck, and that's whether Connor McDavid has it or whether the other team has it. So, we're going to have a good, long, hard look at that player, I'm sure, before we conclude. On the other hand, this is a 25-year-old guy who scored 30 goals in the NHL last season and 54 points. And so clearly there's some offensive talent to be unlocked in there. And 30 goals looks pretty good when you compare him to, say, the guys who were on the wing of Connor McDavid last night. And so it's an upgrade. I'm impressed that Holland was able to move out the Sam Gagner contract in that deal, so basically balance the money for this year. So really, it's only the two second-round picks, and not only that, he even added a minor league player, Kuffner, who is Princeton University's all-time leading goal scorer that Holland himself signed out of college last year. So Holland would know that player. And he got Detroit. Now he hasn't had a great rookie year in Grand Rapids, and he may be a whole lot of not much. But the fact that Holland was able to get that guy included in this deal for the two second-round picks maybe adds a little bit of much-needed depth down in Bakersfield.
Yeah, let's just go over the Oilers' second round picks in recent years, Bruce. Let's start. We'll just go post lockout.
Okay,
So, second round pick, first one, Jeff Petrie.
good pick.
Next one, they didn't have a pick for a couple of years here. Moving on, Anton Lander.
Decent bet. And he played a bunch of NHL games. He wasn't a strikeout by any means. He just never hit,
Okay,
never hit.
Tyler Pitlick, Martin Brinson, and Curtis Hamilton.
2 out of 3 that have had careers in the NHL. None of them is a real difference maker.
David Musil, Mitch Moroz,
Oh,
Marco Roy.
yeah, strike 1, 2, and 3.
Moving on, Tyler Benson.
Well, we're about to find out. Early, he's finally gone through the training periods in the WHL and the AHL, and we're just seeing him breaking in on the NHL stage now. But he has a chance to be the best of all those picks since Jeff Petrie.
Moving on, Ryan McLeod, Olivier Rodrigue, and Raphael Lavoie, and it's too early to tell on any of those players.
Yeah.
So, Bruce, it's pretty obvious that of that group of players, only one of them, Jeff Petrie, has been as good an NHL player in a given year as Andreas Athanasiou was last year when he scored
Right.
30 goals.
Hmm.
So I think you can obviously hit it big with a second round draft pick, but
Yep.
they're not the be all end all of NHL existence. So our friend at the Blue Bullet Report,
Hmm.
Brad McPherson, has done some work valuing draft picks.
Right.
So the first overall draft pick, he gives a value if for a forward. He tries to get it about 100, a career value of it's 102. So the career value for a first overall pick is 102.
Mm-hmm.
For the 10th overall pick, it's about one quarter of that. So the career value for the 10th overall pick is 26.2. For the 30th overall pick, it's 8.9. So it's about 1/10 the career value of the first overall pick. And when you get to the second round, it looks like the average second round pick is about 1/20th the value of the first overall pick. So there's a very rapid drop off in the value of draft picks in the NHL draft, where the first top picks are just incredibly valuable. And then even when you get to like the end of the first round, they're a lot less valuable. In the second round, well, like we just went through the list of players. I don't think the Oilers did a very good job of drafting in the second round. So there might be some teams that hit a lot better in the second round with one or two players. But I think generally speaking, I'm okay with the trade, giving up 2 second-round draft picks for Athanasiou, partly because, well, they didn't give up the first overall. They got a winger who can play in their top 6, and he's an RFA. The Oilers have his rights heading into next year, so it wasn't just a rental. He's not a rental. He's a player that they can sign if they like him. So I'm okay with the value proposition of the trade. And this is I don't know about Athanasiou other than his statistics. Just, his horrible plus minus number of minus 46 and 45 games, or it's the other way around, minus 45.
Other way around, but it's
Okay.
basically a birdie on every hole as he goes for the green jacket.
His horrible plus minus number is obviously wretched, ghastly, but again, that's a number earned by a group of players in Detroit, and they're all horrible and wretched and ghastly this year when it comes to two-way play, it looks like, and he's part of that. So he is a winger, so we'll see how he does. Bruce, I'm going to go to a few comments from the NHL cognoscenti on TSN and Sportsnet, and I'm going to get you to react to them, okay?
Sure.
Here's what they were saying, because I was sitting there glued to my TV set, and through the wonders of the PVR, I was able to transcribe some of their comments. So
I heard many of them.
Brian Burke, Sportsnet. All I can tell you about Athanasiou is he makes both teams dangerous. The Oilers definitely got faster, but this guy is not a defender.
Right.
So that's Brian Burke's assessment, and it lines up with the plus minus. Ray Ferraro. He says, it feels like this is the type of player who has had such a crappy year that can hit lightning here playing with McDavid. He said he's intrigued by this, and then he said, I think that what concerns me is that he likes the puck.
Yes.
Athanasiou likes the puck. He likes to rush it. He likes to carry it. The guy he's going to be playing with should be carrying the puck all the time. And finally, Craig Button said maybe they shouldn't play Athanasiou with McDavid. They should play him with Nugent Hopkins. And Craig Button's comment on TSN was, he plays with blinders on. He's like a drag racer. He's not a Formula One racer. He's just straight ahead. And if you're playing him with Connor McDavid, you better be thinking, where's Connor? And if you're going to play with Connor McDavid, you better be thinking, where's Connor so I can get him the puck?
Yep.
I don't think Athanasiou is a good fit for Connor McDavid. So what do you think of those? Those are the major negative comments.
Yeah, well, the business of him needing to carry the puck, that's a real thing. Yeah. And if you have two full-time puck carriers on one line, there's often not enough pucks to go around. It's one of the reasons that for all of their wonderful skills that Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier always played on separate lines, because they were both primary puck transporters themselves. And I'm not about to compare Andreas Athanasiou to Mark Messier, don't get me wrong, but when you're playing with McDavid, you want guys that can hit the holes and convert the chances, put the puck in the net. Now that we know he can do. The rest, I guess we're about to find out. I think the fact that he's coming in with just 10 goals under his belt this year and that huge minus, there's that actually works a little bit in the Oilers' favor in that when he's RFA this summer, and they have to qualify him at his current salary of $3 million. But that's his platform season that he would be making his potential arbitration or contract demands on. So they should be able to extend the guy for a reasonable sum going forward. But there are big question marks. How can there not be with a guy that's minus 45? I don't care what team he's on. That's pretty atrocious.
But Bruce, in terms of his contract negotiations, you're forgetting the 14 goals he's going to score in 25 playoff games this
Well,
year. So,
yeah, I am.
yeah. So could Pierre LaRouche play with Guy Lafleur? And a more recent example, Taylor Hall and Connor McDavid. I don't think they like. I know some people think that
Yes.
no one gave that a chance. Those guys had zero chemistry. Taylor Hall and Connor McDavid. And Athanasiou sounds to me like a poor man's version of Taylor Hall. Same player, just a lesser version of that player. So.
Yeah,
Uh,
Hull wanted the puck too, and I mean,
yeah,
good on him. I mean, he was a great player because of that. But uh, sometimes, like I say, there's just not enough pucks to go around. So you have to find complementary players.
well, maybe
And
he'll be on the third line, Athanasiou, and good on the third line.
mhm. Well, that's I guess not impossible. Certainly, they're going to have to. Dave Tippett's going to have to do some shuffling and some coaching, and see who fits where. But I'm, so far my idea of complementary players with McDavid are Sam Gagner and Alex Chason coming up to him afterwards to say, "Nice goal, Connor,"
Yeah,
as
the spelling,
opposed to
change the
different
spelling.
spelling. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant, Bruce, brilliant. Um, Dave Tippett gives me faith, Bruce,
Yeah.
that this move
Me
is going to
too.
work out. Tippett seems to be a master this year, at least, of finding the right role for the right player and convincing the player about the role. So so Mike Johnson was on TSN as well, and here's what he said. He says, even if it doesn't fit perfectly, even if they're not the perfect blend, Connor McDavid is talented enough. If you have any kind of offensive instincts, or even to know just to get out of the way or go to the net and let him do his thing, you'll pick up points, you'll pick up goals, you'll feel better for yourself.
Yep.
So that's how he thought Athanasiou might play. And Tippett, it's I with Athanasiou's poor goal scoring this year and terrible plus minus, he might be a little bit humbled here.
Mm.
And thinking, so if Tippett says, okay, buddy, yeah, if you got the lane with the puck, take it to the net, of course.
Right.
But other than that, just when you say McDavid go to the net, you go to the net and you get in front of that goalie and you stop at the net and you get that rebound or you get the tip in. And then you forecheck like hell and you get him the puck.
Mhm.
And on defense, you stay with your man and you stay between your man and the net. Like three things. That's what we want
Yeah.
from you, essentially. I think that might work. I think that I've got some hope there, Bruce, that these are very simple roles for a winger to play. It's not asking a ton, and maybe that's going to work. I would hate to see the Oilers have to break up the dynamite line, Draisaitl, Yamamoto, and Nugent Hopkins. I just don't want to see that. So it will be fantastic if if you get a line with Athanasiou, McDavid, and Cassian. That is a big, fast, skilled hockey
Certainly
line.
fast. Yeah. I'm not sure who is the defensive conscience on that line, but there's
Dave
certainly going
Tippett.
to be exciting at both ends of the ice, as that one commenter noted.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't expecting them to make a trade, Bruce. Today, I didn't think they'd pull off the big trade because I thought from that other teams were going to be more desperate to pay a higher price, including for Athanasiou, who was on the block. So that was my prediction. I was incorrect. I think Holland, and I was partly basing it just on Holland's verbal going in. He didn't seem too keen to pull the trigger on, but maybe he's a good card player, good poker player, as Kurt Levins suggested. Kurt Levins in his blog post yesterday said the Oilers might be making some big moves, and Kurt Levins
Yeah.
was correct.
Yeah, I think he named a couple of the names too, didn't he?
I think he may well. Kurt's on a pretty big hot streak here, man. We're lucky to have him. So Bruce, Tyler Ennis, what do you think?
Yeah. Well, a year ago, Tyler Ennis was on the last year of a 5-year, $23 million contract. And as that wound down, he'd gone from being a pretty regular um, sort of 40 plus point scorer to uh, dropping off the map. But this year he's bounced back. We talked about this a little bit last night because his name has come up. But 33 points in 61 games, -5 in Ottawa, which is not terrible. He's uh, got the most goals, most assists, and most points for him since 2014-15. So a little bit of a renaissance year, and I think part of that has to do with good health, and probably part of it has to do with just having more opportunity in Ottawa, where there's not a lot of players ahead of him. But he is a proven player. He's got 600 NHL games under his belt and 300 points over the course of his what is it now, 10 seasons, and he's just 30 years old. So he's basically he's the new Gagne, but a faster
Yeah.
Gagne, and a left shooting Gagne, and a much cheaper Gagne at 800,000. For a depth player, which is much more in keeping with what Ken Holland likes to pay for his third and fourth liners. And I think we'll see him as a depth player, but chipping in here and there and maybe moving up the lineup. And if Athanasiou's having a bad night, you might see Ennis get some of his shifts, and putting a little pressure on that way. But depth guys with some knowledge of where the net is always a nice idea to have one or two of those somewhere lower down your batting order. They can't all be 5 goal scorers.
Yeah, I really like the pickup of Ennis, like a fifth round draft pick. You just give it up, a flyer. You're taking a flyer at that point, although you can get a good player 1 in 10 years, maybe.
Nothing
Bruce,
better.
exactly. And he'd be the 1 in 10 years.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
so Tyler Ennis is actually scoring at a higher rate than Athanasiou at even strength this year. Ennis ranks 161st out of 393 regular NHL forwards. Ennis is at 1.86 points per 60.
that's pretty good.
Athanasiou is at 238th at
Wow.
157. So he's Gagne is at 284th overall in the rankings. So Kyler Yamamoto is fourth, 3.38 points per 60.
Wow.
Draisaitl is ninth. McDavid's 21st. Cassian is 79th. Nugent Hopkins is 94th. And Ennis is 161st. That's pretty good for Tyler Ennis. James Neal is at 331st out of 393. So when you talk about maybe moving Neal down the roster, you can see, you know, he kind of slots into the chase on role, maybe as the third line guy, and then on the power play. But yeah, we can definitely see, you know, the Oilers have really transformed that top six. I mean, we don't know if Athanasiou is going to stick there, but I'm assuming he's going to. Not bad, not bad work.
Well, they've transformed the top six, the bottom six, and the defensive six. With the
And
three
the goalie,
trades,
yeah,
with the three trades,
yeah,
and today's date. I mean, the Mike Green trade technically came down after midnight Eastern time, so it's a deadline trade as well. Uh, I think looking at the overall situation, what impresses me about, I mean, we don't know how the bets are going to turn out,
yeah,
but we do know this, that Ken Holland, in bringing in 3 NHL players to his roster, was able to move out 2 undesirable contracts and Kyle Brodziak and Sam Gagner. I have nothing bad to say about Sam Gagner as a player, but his contract was pretty toxic at $3.15 million
yeah,
that Oilers got back for Ryan Spooner. Well, they moved that out now for Athanasiou at the same dollar rate, who is a young up and comer as opposed to Sam being more of that depth guy with some pop in his stick. Uh, so he got rid of those 2 contracts. He brought in 4 guys. So the Oilers are right at the 50-man limit now. And he gave up 2 seconds, a fourth, and a fifth-round draft choice in the future. But what he did not give up was any of Philip Broberg, Evan Bouchard, Dmitry Samorukov, Tyler Benson, Any of the, Ryan McLeod, any
Guys who
of
are
the young
closer.
guys in the system, uh, they're there and closer to the NHL than some second or fourth round pick from this or next year's draft is, or almost by definition a half a decade away. So he was able to keep his current prospect pool intact, and in fact add one player to that. And the only guys that he moved out, I think we can say they're upgrades to the current roster, and without pillaring his prospect depth, but where they are really going to be short now going forward is draft picks. Man, Saturday on draft day is going to be deadly dull for us, I think, because I got no second, third, or fourth, as the way things are shaping up now.
Well,
And next year they've given up potentially the second and the fifth. So that's a few holes. Like they only got about 4 or 5 picks a year for the next couple of years.
they could trade Puljujärvi for a draft pick. They could trade
Yes,
Jujhar Khaira for a draft pick. Um,
potentially.
yeah, they could trade a defenseman and get a draft pick.
Yeah,
Um,
they may have to do that after the
yeah,
season to recoup the draft choice. But for now, they've strengthened the team for the stretch run, and that's off. When you look at all that, added 3 players, took nothing really from the team, took nothing from the prospect pool, and no first rounder traded either. I mean, that's the other big asset that remains with the Oilers. They kept their first rounder.
here's what I like about Ken Holland's work. Last year, when the Oilers were behind in games, Bruce, they had very little chance of coming back because they couldn't put pressure on the opposing team on the forecheck. They were too slow.
Mm-hmm.
They put out their third and fourth lines, and those guys were just too slow to get after it. And so here's who they've gotten rid of. These are all players who played more than 300 minutes last year for the Oilers. Forwards: Kyle Brodziak, Ty Ratty, Sam Gagner, Milan Lucic, and Colby Cave. All played more than 300 minutes for the Oilers, and Lucic played a lot,
Yeah,
and so did Ratty, and so did Brodziak. Those guys were all slow by
none of
NHL
them could
standards.
skate. Hey,
None of
yeah,
them could skate. So here's who they have now instead: Gaetan Haas, Tyler Ennis, Joachim Nygaard, Andreas Athanasiou, and Josh Archibald. And all of those guys are at least above average NHL
yeah.
skaters, and some of them, Nygaard and Athanasiou, are two of the fastest players in the NHL. Tyler Ennis is pretty fast, as I recall, as well. So Bruce, they've taken 5 of the slowest players in the NHL, and they brought in a few of the fastest, and other guys above average. Gaetan Haas is really fast as well. I just, so Brian Burke was kind of complaining, well, who's going to win the puck? Essentially, you got all that speed. Who's going to win the puck? He was grumping. I'd say all of those players are better puck winners as well, pretty much as their counterparts. I don't know about Athanasiou in that regard, but Archibald wins pucks. Nygaard is good on the forecheck. He wins pucks. Haas, well, he doesn't win that many pucks. He's just fast. But we'll see, and we'll see Ennis and Athanasiou. But I'm feeling pretty
Nygaard's
good
good
about
on the
this.
Nygaard's good on the puck uh,
He really is.
recovery too.
He really
Uh,
is.
it reminds me of speed is that element that's useful in both offense and defense.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of some work Bill James did back in the 1980s, in which he determined that the guys that get to the most balls make the most plays, even if they make more errors on average than the other guys. If you get to 20 more balls and you throw 3 of them into the dugout, you still made 17 plays that weren't made. And he also did some research that showed outfielders that had a reputation for having weak throwing arms still got more than their share of assists from the outfield if they were speedsters. They just got to the ball quicker than the base runner was calculating, and even a sort of average throw into the base might beat a base runner just because the guy throwing the ball was a second early compared to a comparable play from an average player. And that kind of speed, I mean, if you win a race to the puck, you've won a puck battle. It's not like you've gone into the boards and bashed some big guy and taken the
Yeah.
puck out of his possession. You just went in there first and got it. And that's a valid puck battle, in my opinion, and the more speed, the better. You
I
got
did
your
it
mute
again.
on.
speed. Bruce is putty in Dave Tippett's hands. He knows how to mold that speed into a useful hockey player, and I think he's going to do that with all of these players. And I don't think I mean there's all of this bad verbiage, negative verbiage about Athanasiou right now, right? Like, and we're just hearing what they're willing to say on the air, on
Right.
TV. Respectable commentators who have to make respectable comments, but Ken Holland, he knows
Plus
everything about
Bradford.
him. Yeah, plus Breinberg. Ken Holland knows everything about this player. He's been around him. He's been around him for years. And he knows about this player and he knows
Hmm.
about his coach. He's not trading for this player if he doesn't think his coach can make something of this player. And from what I've seen of Dave Tippett, the way that Archibald, Sheahan have improved this year, stepped up their games. Other players have stepped up their games, found their roles on the Oilers. I'm confident there's a short time span, and it took Archibald and Sheahan a while to really
Hmm.
get going. And there is just a short time span here. It's like a month and a half, I guess, to playoffs. Correct?
Yeah.
Month, 5 weeks, 6
40,
weeks.
40 days before the regular season finale is when the trade deadline is. It's like
Okay.
Lent from here to the end of the season, 40 days, and then, of course, another half week before they actually start playing playoff games. So 6 weeks.
So he's got some time here. He's got some games. He's got 20, 20 games. Yeah, 20
Yes.
games. So it was about 20 games that it took Sheahan and Archibald to really get going.
Yep.
So we'll see. I'm pretty happy, Bruce. It's been like as I said to start off this podcast, it has been a long time since we've had a trade deadline. I mean, unless you count the trade deadline where they traded for Alice Kotelik, and
Patrick O'Sullivan.
is that it? Oh God.
Yeah. Yeah, they got a pick in the Patrick O'Sullivan deal, and they immediately used it on Alish Kotelik.
Oh God. Anyway,
Then there was
yeah,
a year we brought in Jared Smithson
I remember
in
that.
2013 when they were actually in the playoff hunt in the lockout shortened Ralph Kruger season. And the big ad at the deadline was Jared Smithson, who had done well in the face-off circle against New Jersey in the previous year's playoffs, and otherwise didn't really have a lot going on in his career.
Yeah.
And they really didn't do a lot to help that team. And the one playoff year, of course, in all those years, they brought in David DeHarnay, who did score one mammoth goal in those playoffs in 2017, but he wasn't really a difference maker. Today they brought in three experienced NHL players, just using round numbers: 900 games played for Mike Green, 600 for Tyler Ennis, 300 for Andreas Athanasiou. I mean, these are guys that have been around, know the league, and have established what they're capable of. And so we'll see what Coach Dave Tippett can do with them. But I have to say, to this point, I'm impressed with what Coach Dave Tippett has done with his team, and I'm impressed with what GM Ken Holland has done with his team. And I think Holland really he soft pedaled what he was going to do today, but he really pulled the trigger on changing not the core of his team. The core of his team is intact, but changing the moving parts, and some of them move a lot faster than the old parts.
Yeah, I did a poll. Let me just have a look what the results are. I just asked about the Athanasiou trade.
95%.
Yeah, 94%. We've had about 1,500 votes now, and 94% of Oilers fans approve of the trade. So people are happy, Bruce.
People love
You know,
trades generally, but most trades.
it's interesting because Shirelli, yeah, that's true. Shirelli was in a similar kind of situation with a team in about a similar kind of spot
Mm-hmm.
in 2017, and he just made the one small trade. And there's been people who have criticized him for that, saying he should have gone in a
Right.
little bit harder on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so Holland didn't take the same approach. We'll see if it works out any differently than it did, excuse me, for Shirelli. But you're right. People are really positive usually when there's a trade. That's typically the response. But often people are right. Often if people really think it's a great trade, people were pretty excited when James Neal was traded for Milan Lucic.
Yep.
That's worked out okay.
Yeah, not bad. I mean, the Neil contract is itself fairly toxic, but it's a damn sight better than the Lucic contract was. The three guys he's added today, the good thing is there's no long-term commitments at all. I mean, both Green and Ennis are UFA at the end of this year, and add them to the pile of all these other guys they have that are expiring free agents, where presumably he's going to keep the best of them. And Athanasiou is not locked up for some big contract figure. It remains to be seen if and for how much and for how long they come to terms on a new deal. But it's not like they're locked into something. They've taken on somebody else's contract problem. It's not that. I do know Holland did have issues negotiating with this player last time around, so that could get interesting at some point. But the Oilers do have the hammer of RFA rights.
And he could go, Athanasiou can go to arbitration, I
Yes, he
understand.
can.
So any other comments about other teams, Bruce, what they've done? The Flames, I guess, picked up Mr. Gustafsson.
Hmm.
He's a hell of a hockey player.
The guy John Willis and I watched at Oilers summer development camp a number of years ago, and we both came away and said, geez, that guy looked good. Just so polished and smooth, and made it look so easy how he moved the puck. And of course, the Oilers never signed him. The one that really kind of popped my eyes a little bit was Vegas Golden Knights picking up Robin Lehner. I
Yikes.
did not see him going to Vegas. I thought for sure he would go to Carolina. So that's a divisional rival now that has got, I would say, unquestionably the best goaltending in the division, with both Marc-Andre Fleury and Robin Lehner. Of course, the good news is come playoff time, they can't both play at once. They're going to, use one or the other. But they're well covered in the net, and they had been having big problems with their backup goalie. They were playing Fleury almost every game, and now they're going to be able to use him a little more judiciously down the stretch.
They
So
gave up
that's a big pickup.
Malcolm Malcolm Subban and their second pick for Leonard.
That's not bad at all.
That's
Really.
not a bad price. That because Leonard he's a starting goalie, that's for sure. Is
And
Fleury hurt? I
Subban is
don't
not.
pay that much attention to other teams,
He was
honestly.
for a while, and
Yeah.
Subban played a bunch and sort of failed the test, is what I recall. But this was months ago, and I couldn't give you a lot of details. But there's a reason Vegas was a little down in the standings for much of the season, and part of that was they only had one goalie they could count on.
There's still no news on what Calgary gave up to get Gustafsson. I'm
Mhm.
guessing a second round pick or two would be the price. I'm just guessing though, so I don't know. Hopefully a lot. Hopefully they
There
paid dearly.
there was a story going around one time today that Johnny Gaudreau had left the ice during the Flames practice. And of course, all the radar went up. Now, if player leaves ice and practice on the trade deadline, where's he
Mhm.
going, right? I was already nicknaming him Johnny Good Riddance. Uh, and then he comes back and he tells reporters, I had to go pee.
Flames. That was funny. The Flames also got Derek Forbert
Oh,
from
that guy.
the yeah.
Yeah, he played against the Oilers last night. He got into it with somebody in the game last night. Who was it he was jostling with? There was a scrum chase on.
Yeah. Well, Bruce, I'm glad the Oilers kept their first pick. They
Hmm.
got a top six winger. I think they have their third line center in Riley Sheahan, honestly. They
Hmm.
got a really good depth forward, faster version of Sam Gagner. They got a depth D man to help out because you always need D men. That's for sure. They go down like flies. You know, you know, Russell's hurt, Clefbaum's hurt, Matt Benning's been hurt much of the year. This really helps. They don't have to rush back if you have Mike Green. Um, I really like that trade. So I'm going to give Ken Holland um, an A, grade
Hmm.
A, not A plus because if you had just given like a second and a third round pick for, I would have been that much more happier with the Athanasiou trade. But that's just quibbling. But I'll give him an A. What about you?
Yeah, I can't argue. He got rid of a couple of contracts that weren't helping. He brought in three players who might help, and he gave up neither the first round pick nor any of his core prospect group. So those are all check marks from where I sit. And the Dartha draft choices, well, that's going to be something they're going to have to figure out going ahead, but it doesn't affect this year's team and it doesn't really affect next year's team. It's a down the road thing, and if Holland has shown one thing already, it's that he's able to find players to flesh out his roster, and we know that the core group is here for a long time. So I think the team is pretty well positioned at this moment in time.
Yeah, like, you don't have the second round pick. Well, they're going to bring in maybe Slepyshev back next year, right? Like, the players that we listed, remember all those, we went down that list. I mean, Slepyshev is as good as a lot of those guys. So, he's as good as probably Tyler Picklick in the end. So, yeah, good day overall. Well, thanks for talking, Bruce.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. We look forward to seeing all these new guys, or at least most of them, in action tomorrow night in Anaheim, which is the next game, and then right on to Vegas after that. So we got to look right away and see how what the impact may be on the ice.
Thanks again. And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.